Hello and welcome to the show. Some great news for you that Melbourne's going to deliver the most number of auctions we've seen so far this year. A bit has to do with the Melbourne Cup. Kevin Brogan back with me from CoreLogic in just a moment to give us all the details.
Point your clients in the right direction with our range of directional signage. With a variety of options, we have a pointer board for every situation. Made with quality, durable materials, they're built to withstand our varying weather.
And we welcome into the show Kevin Brogan from CoreLogic. Hi Kevin, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent, my friend. Well, Melbourne Cup, the crunch time comes. Let's bring up the auction. Well, before we do that, let's bring up the auction clearance rates from last week. Both Melbourne and Sydney into the 70s, Sydney almost 80%. How does that compare to last week?
Oh, look, that's a significant improvement in Sydney for last week. Sydney, has had a very consistent number of auctions over the last few weeks, and it really is sort of showing the sort of depth of the demand and the confidence in the market. Melbourne, maybe just down a fraction, but I mean, again, fairly solidly in that sort of mid 70% range.
And giving us a weighted average national clearance of 72.1%, still a good result. Before we give you the numbers for this weekend, let's have a look at the Sydney sub-regions. Compare that to last week for us, Kevin.
Yeah, look, we've seen the same sort of pattern as that we've come to expect out of the sort of higher value sub-regions. I mean, eastern suburbs up at 86%, inner west at 86.9%. North Sydney and Hornsby and the Northern Beaches, again, above 80%. So there's a really sort of strong spread in those areas. The surprise, as we mentioned with the preliminary result, is to see Blacktown up there. Obviously, very much a smaller auction market, lower numbers, but we haven't seen Blacktown sort of heading the list with above 80% for, well, I can't remember the last time that we saw them up there. So I think the key to the 79% plus across the whole city is the fact that there's been fairly strong performances in most of the regions.
Even look at the West at 75% off 105 auctions. It's a pretty good result out of the West.
Oh, look, it certainly is. As I say, I mean, we've seen the drive coming into the auction market out of the higher values.
Sorry, that's Melbourne I'm talking about there. I'm jumping ahead of the game here a bit. But still good result out of Sydney. Let's bring up the Melbourne numbers, and I just highlighted there for you the West. I was getting a bit excited about Melbourne. It's coming up to the Melbourne Cup, big weekend this weekend. We'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But West, 75.3% of 105 auctions. That's a pretty good result out of the West.
Look, absolutely. In Melbourne, we see a little bit more of an even spread, I think, across the different markets. We've mentioned a number of times the fact that the outer east has been leading the way, and again it does this week. But as you say, I mean, over in the west, I mean, there's a fair variety of property types in that direction. A fair bit of new property, big growth area, and we're seeing really quite strong results out of there. Mornington Peninsula, as we've mentioned before, maybe a little bit more volatile. And not quite coming up to the other sub-regions.
So summarising Melbourne for us from last week, what were the highlights for you, Kevin?
Oh, look, I think we saw. I think we covered it over the weekend broadcast about a property that needed a lot of tender, loving care to bring it up to speed. Purchased for a price of $6.3 million. I mean, that did sort of stick out as an indication of how strong some of these results are. I think that particular property, great location, but a really big commitment to take that on to be a modern home.
Absolutely. And let's have a look at the auction numbers. You can see now why we're getting so excited. Sydney 729, but have a look at Melbourne 1,435 auctions. How does that compare to this time last year, Kevin?
Oh, look, we definitely saw a big surge in listings for the corresponding weekend. I mean, this is, as you pointed out, very much a sort of spring racing carnival, Melbourne Cup phenomenon. So each year we do see people write off, if you like, largely the weekend of the public holiday, and listing decisions are sort of brought forward. So this time last year we did see a surge, not quite as high as that, but this is going to be followed by the next weekend with the spring racing carnival. We'll see much more muted activity out in Melbourne that week.
And just looking at the numbers too out of Adelaide, does that indicate that a lot of Adelaide people will be going across to Melbourne for the Cup?
Oh, look, it may well do. I mean, certainly in Adelaide, we don't get the day off, but we certainly have a bit of a lunch on the race day. Look, I think Adelaide, the spring season, we've seen some of the high value properties taken to auction in Adelaide doing pretty well. And obviously we've had results over an extended period, which would give encouragement to people to list. So not sure whether Adelaide's entirely due to the Melbourne Cup, but certainly it's good to see that number of properties coming to auction. Big increase on last week's activity.
Yeah, quite apart from Adelaide and Melbourne, all the others, fairly normal, what we'd expect in the market.
Yeah, look, Brisbane's down a little. Last week they had 140, which was right up at the sort of upper end of activity. I think that's the highest level of activity in Brisbane since June. Obviously, that sort of dropped back a little. Canberra's a little bit down on last week as well.
Okay, so just a summary for you. The weighted average, 72.1% off the back of some pretty good results out of Sydney and Melbourne. Sydney almost reaching 80% final clearance, and Melbourne at 73.2%. Big weekend coming up. Almost 2,500 auctions across the country, due largely to a surge in numbers out of Melbourne as people maybe clear the weekend following that for a trip to the Melbourne Cup. Mate, are you going to go to the Melbourne Cup?
Oh no, I don't think so this year. But certainly we'll be having an event in the office, so I'll certainly be watching it when it comes.
Yeah. Well, mate, this time next week I'll call you for your tips on the Cup. Okay, so it just gives you a week's notice.
I wouldn't listen to those.
What, your tips or mine?
Oh, I'm not sure. I haven't been studying your form, Kevin.
Okay, well, you got a week to scrub up, mate. All right. Kevin Brogan joins us every Friday with the most comprehensive final wrap on the preceding week's events in auctions around the country, and also a look ahead at what's coming up. Also on Monday, Kevin will rejoin me and we'll have a look at our auction wrap for the weekend, and we'll give you the first rush of numbers. Will also take you inside the top sales in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth, as well as Canberra. Kevin Brogan from CoreLogic, thank you so much for your time, my friend, and look forward to talking to you on Monday.
Cheers. Looking forward to it, Kevin.
Have a good weekend. I'm Kevin Turner. A reminder for you that Property News Update is out today. Also, Real Estate Talk is out tomorrow. All of our programs, of course, available on demand or streamed live through propertytv.io. I'm Kevin Turner. See you next time.